his perspective on the latest developments. Albania is finding itself in an increasingly unusual position, I think, for a country that has been really trying to transform itself over the last several decades, and has really been trying to forge a much closer relationship with the European Union, with NATO, and with many of its other European partners. Albania has been on a very difficult but very promising path, and now finds itself at the crossroads of something I think that Albanians would find extraordinarily unexpected. The migration routes and the refugee crisis in Europe, as the neighbouring countries have struggled with dealing with the huge flow of refugees coming out of Syria and the Middle East, passing through the Balkans. Albania now finds itself as the new crossroads. And we're very interested in hearing the Foreign Minister's perspectives on how Albania is going to cope with all of these new challenges that were perhaps not on the agenda when you first took over a couple of years ago as Foreign Minister. We're going to start with an address, and then the Foreign Minister and I are going to have a conversation with you here in the audience. The address will be public, and then the conversation, in the hopes of having this more frank and engaging, will be off the record. So without any further ado, Foreign Minister Bushati, thank you so much for joining us today, and we very much look forward to having a very engaging conversation with you. And I also want to say that it's a great privilege as a fellow think tanker that someone who started off life in a more scholarly setting should be the Foreign Minister, something that the rest of us at Brookings can also aspire to, I think. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Fiona, for your kind introduction, and thank you also for calling me Ditmir, because for some of the fellows that are here, they know what happened when my Greek colleague called me Dimitri.
Oh, yeah.
In the Albanian media, it caused a little bit fuss, so I thank you very much for the kind introduction and for calling my name as it is Ditmir, which in Albania means good day. I would like to thank the Brookings institution for inviting me and for the opportunity to share some thoughts on Albania and the current political and security environment in Europe. I cherish the opportunity to speak in an academic environment because this is a place which naturally drives you towards long-term reflections and analysis. Indeed, my daily work, the world of political diplomatic actions, imposes a much faster pace, where solutions are needed here and now. The key lies on how to combine these two worlds in order to strike the necessary balance between today and tomorrow. We live in challenging times, facing unprecedented crises, without possessing yet the right instruments to address them. From a humanitarian standpoint, the world has gone through a tough couple of years. The UNHCR annual report, published last June, said that worldwide displacement was at the highest level ever recorded. The number of people forcibly displaced had risen to nearly 60 million people worldwide. That equals roughly the combined population of the state of New York and California. But it has not been all doom and gloom. The Iran deal, the adoption of the UN Agenda 2030, the historic peace agreement on climate changes show that multilateralism can deliver, that patient diplomacy can overcome the challenges posed by a depressing global security atmosphere, that ultimately success can breed success. What does this all mean for a small country such as Albania? What specific challenges and opportunities are there for countries of what I like to call Adriatic Europe? Last December, Albania celebrated a quarter of century of democratic change. And let me tell you that it has not been a stroll in the park. We had to relearn the hard way what democracy is and how it can be embedded in the foundations of a modern state through the rule of law. We had to learn about the market economy and everything that it brings along. And while we would like to progress at a faster pace, one cannot simply fast forward history. In the course of the last 25 years, Albania managed to thoroughly transform itself with the help of friends and allies, particularly that of the United States. Since 2009, a NATO member, since 2014, a candidate country to the European Union. Last year, we signed Declaration of Strategic Partnership with the United States, and our contribution to peace and stability in Southeast Europe is undisputed. Our orientation is clear. We belong to the transatlantic community, and EU ascension is not only our core interest, but also our identity. Nevertheless, like all countries of the Western Balkans, Albania faces today a set of internal and external challenges. Internally, the lack of consolidated democratic credentials, the tough requirements for fast development, and the absolute need to get closer to the European Union have made us live in a sort of ongoing reform process. Externally, in many respects, our region is still in slow motion. Europe is a continent, as you described, in pain, and the threats from the east and south continue to pose additional new challenges. It is the combination of all these factors that influence our capacity and speed to further development. When we consider development models, it appears that the traditional dichotomy between conflict and stable countries is a model of the past. It does not always reflect what it is at the root of the conflict, nor the dynamics of conflict resolution nowadays. In my view, every development agenda should integrate instruments that address what keeps old contradictions alive and counter what feeds new ones. The Western Balkans used to be the typical conflict region 2 decades ago. The region is now engaged in process of cooperation and integration, demonstrating the readiness to address bilateral disputes in a spirit of good relations. It is important to remind that this process is not reversible. It is the EU accession perspective that keeps us going, that pushes us closer together, that demands that we get more interconnected. In our corner of Europe, we face the same challenges, so our responses need to be in concert too. Where threats like violent extremisms or the refugee crisis know no borders, neither can our action to counter them, whether through hard or soft measures. Dear friends, the fight against terrorism and the prevention of violent extremism, alongside efforts to counter it efficiently, represents two of the most serious challenges to international peace and security. The terrible events of the last years have clearly shown that no country is immune to such risks and threats, and this is the same for our region and my own country. Albania has joined since the very start the global coalition against Daesh, and we have helped the Peshmerga fighters with military equipment and ammunition. Like almost every other country, we have been confronted with the phenomenon of foreign fighters at the early years of the Syrian conflict. Even though this phenomenon is of a much smaller magnitude compared to other countries, our government has quickly adopted very bold measures and have stepped up efforts to discourage foreign fighters. Now, the number of the intended persons to travel to the conflict areas has come to a halt. But we know that this is not enough. Last November, we adopted a national strategy on countering violent extremism. Now, work is underway to establish a regional center on countering violent extremism, which will bring together efforts and the commitment of the government, civil society, media, and the religious communities to make continuous efforts to prevent violent extremism in the region. In particular, we are investing in education programs and school curricula to provide our children and our youth with the proper knowledge to successfully resist hate, discrimination, and to reinforce social cohesion. Dear friends, the second point I would like to make is on the current refugee crisis and its spillover effects across the continent. Indeed, over the past year, we have witnessed the rise of legitimate concerns about the terrorism and migration nexus, the rise of not so legitimate negative stereotypes, the rise of political extremes across Europe, the rise of distrust among neighbors and allies. All this at the expense of cross-border cooperation and of a united response. Over the last year, the European way of dealing with refugee crisis has been in fact a confused set of messages and policies. An external observer could go as far as saying that over the past year we appear united in selfishness, as if we were concerned between, on one hand, the values of liberty and solidarity, on the other, the increasingly illiberal set of policies that are blurring the political debate across the continent. I believe that at this particular moment in time, it is important for the Western Balkan countries to avoid becoming stationary countries, as this would be highly disruptive for the entire region, not to mention the security concerns. The next few weeks will be critical as we try to avoid the temptation to bring national responses to a pan-European problem. My concern is that the above-mentioned issues have helped downgrade the EU enlargement as a second-tier issue, and we are all now feeling the heat of the EU debate about reestablishing borders, quotas, and the end of Schengen. Indeed, the refugee crisis and the joint fight against terrorism made the Western Balkans and the EU experience their interdependence firsthand. It is crucial to translate this interdependence into an enhanced cooperation with the Western Balkans in order to help them successfully finalize the democratic state-building exercise. In this context, the continuation of the so-called Berlin process, launched by German Chancellor Merkel, and the pursuit of concrete regional deliverables for Adriatic Europe will be particularly important in the next few months. And here, allow me to share some thoughts on the opportunities that lie ahead, even as Europe faces a political stress test. Indeed, another issue of paramount importance for us in Adriatic Europe is energy security. Our power generation system relies entirely on hydro, which can be unpredictable. A great opportunity has opened up for us not only to diversify, but also to secure a much-needed long-term backup. Work is already underway to build the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, which will transport natural gas from Azerbaijan to Italy through Turkey, Greece, and Albania. Its completion will allow the beginning of a gasification process in my country. Our long-term goal is to turn Albania into a regional energy hub, enabling a regional supply to the north through the Ionian Adriatic pipeline. Trans-Adriatic pipeline will also contribute to further reduce Europe's dependency and increase predictability. Connecting TAP pipeline with EAP will increase regional energy security for Europe and create new investment opportunities for the Western Balkans. This makes TAP more than just an exercise in diversification of supply. It could be an element of the Europeans' neighborhood policy, especially as the region seems to have delivered when it comes to collective security. Dear friends, the economic data show that the Western Balkan countries have remained behind, not only compared to other EU member states, but also to other Central and Eastern European countries that have since joined European Union. Over the past 25 years, both EU and US have invested heavily over the last 2 decades on our region's democratic stability. Now, the right approach is to support regional interconnectivity as a way to release the growth potential. This is particularly true of Adriatic Europe, where existing synergies must be used to reduce distances and integrate markets in order to help increase the levels of income in the wider area. But as past experience have clearly shown, for the process to be successful, the United States need to participate and actively engage. Albania shares with the United States deep historic ties, which go back to the birth of modern Albania. Our special connection with the United States has been forged especially through our progress towards building a democratic society. It has strengthened throughout a long series of joint responses to common challenges based on shared values. I strongly believe that this special bond gives us energy, but also the responsibility to continue to promote peace, enhance security, and strengthen democracy in our part of Europe. Thank you very much.